Most ghost towns in Colorado, they faded away quietly, right? But there is one place where the mountains, they didn't just take the town back, okay? No, they tried to bury it. And the town is called Independence, Colorado. High in the mountains above Aspen, okay? And in the winter of 1880, men, they were still climbing over 12,000 foot passes just to get there. And it was for one reason: gold. So picture the scene, okay? It's July 4th, 1879, and a group of prospectors are working, high up in the mountains near what we now call Independence Pass. And on that day, they actually make a discovery, right? Gold in the rock. And it's not just flakes down in the creek, right? Real hard rock gold. It's the kind that, that can start a town. And, excuse me, the kind that can literally start a mining stampede. And that's exactly what happened. So within months, word spread all across Colorado. And you had prospectors that began climbing up into the mountains from literally every direction. But here's the thing, right? This was not easy country, okay? This was the high alpine wilderness. Brutal winters, okay? Thin air, avalanches, and snow that could literally stay on the ground for 8 months of the year. But none of that mattered once gold entered into the story. So men were climbing over, Independence Pass just in the dead of winter just to reach this new mining district. And by the summer of 1880, we had a full town that had appeared. You had cabins and the boarding houses and the saloons, right? A newspaper, okay, a school. You even had a church. And at its peak, Independence had nearly 1,500 residents living at over 10,800 feet above sea level. That's one of the highest mining towns in Colorado. So imagine trying to actually build a life up there, right? Hauling lumber up over the mountain passes, digging mine shafts in frozen ground. And if you guys ever dug in frozen ground, trying to survive the winters where the snow would bury entire buildings. But again, the gold was real. And the mines surrounding Independence, man, they were producing impressive ore. I mean, we had mines with names like the Independence Mine. We had the Farwell and the Grover Cleveland Mine. All of these were just driven into the mountain. And you had the ore being pulled out and hauled down really steep trails to the stamp mills where the massive iron stamps just crushed that rock into powder. And then again, we had mercury being used to capture that gold. Man, that process was crude. And we all know now how dangerous that is. And also, come on, incredibly wasteful by modern standard. But that means something interesting to us prospectors. You see, a lot of the gold, it escaped those really early recovery systems. You had that fine gold, right? And the gold that was washed out of tailing piles, and gold that, you guys, it still exists in the surrounding ground today. You see, Independence, it wasn't just a mining camp. It was an actual full frontier boomtown. I mean, the saloons, they stayed open late. Gambling tables, they ran all night long. And you had miners coming fresh out of the shafts, spending their money as fast as they could make it. And because in mining towns, wealth, it never felt permanent to anybody, right? It feels temporary. Like the next cave-in, right? The next bad winter, or the next failed shaft that might take everything away. And sometimes the mountains, it would remind them who was really in charge. Avalanches, oh my gosh, they were just constant threats there. And entire cabins could just disappear overnight. Miners traveling between camps, sometimes they just vanished in storms that rolled over the pass without a single warning. Imagine walking those mountain trails in winter, right? No modern gear, no radios, just snow, wind, and darkness. And somewhere out there, you had a narrow little trail that led you back to town. But the biggest threat to independence, it wasn't avalanches, okay? It was something quieter. Transportation. Because while the gold was real, the district had one major, and I'm talking major disadvantage. It was incredibly hard to reach. Everything had to be hauled over extremely high mountain passes, and it was done by mule, right? So the food, the lumber, the mining equipment, even the stamp mill parts. And if you know about stamp mills, maybe we'll talk about that later, but that's a lot. And all of it was dragged up into the mountains piece by piece. And then something happened that just sealed the town's entire fate. Okay? Well, the railroad, it reached Aspen. And suddenly you had miners and investors coming to these really important realizations. Aspen was easier. Lower elevation, better transportation, and it was just as rich as Independence. So slowly, right, the center of gravity just kind of shifted, and the money, it all started flowing towards Aspen instead of Independence. Investors, right, they just moved. And so then the miners followed them, and the town high up on the pass, it just slowly began to empty out. And so then we find ourselves in the late 1880s, and you see independence was already fading away. Like, you had abandoned buildings, the mines started to slow production, and it happened quick. And the winter storms, they just kind of slowly started reclaiming the town. Cabins, they would literally collapse under the heavy snow. And, the avalanches would sweep through the valley. And, you had this once booming mining camp that slowly just slipped into ghost town status. And today, when you go up and visit Independence, which if you haven't, you should, you can still walk through, the ruins, the stone foundations, the collapsed cabins, the old mine dumps just scattered across the hillsides. And you have that quiet sound of wind just moving through the mountains. But if you know what you're looking at, right, you can still see the outlines of the boom, where the saloons stood, where the miners lived, where thousands of tons of gold-bearing rock were hauled out of the mountain by hand. And here's a strange part about this, is just like many of the old mining districts, right? The gold didn't disappear, okay? The veins, at this moment, they're still in the mountain. And weather is still breaking them apart. And tiny pieces of gold are, still washing down the slopes and creeks every year. The system that created the gold rush, it never actually stopped. And I'm going to repeat this 1,000 times because it's one of the secrets of Colorado mining history. A town can die. A district can fade. But the geology, it doesn't care, okay? the mountains, they just keep working long after the miners leave. So if you enjoy stories like this, okay, forgotten mining camps and lost boom towns and the strange history, right, that gets buried into the Rocky Mountains, make sure you subscribe. Hit the like button, so more people who love mining history can, find this channel. And, turn on the notifications so that you don't miss the next episode that I drop. And if you've ever explored the ruins of Independence, okay, or if you've walked the mining trails around Aspen, hey, drop your story in the comments down below, because some of the best mining history, it's still being discovered, by the people who are out there walking the ground today. And until the next episode, keep your eyes on the mountains, okay? Because the gold rush, it never really ended.